Senator Rice, you've got 10 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening. I was going to ask some questions about the proposed inclusion of energy from the burning of wood from native forests under the renewable energy target and being eligible for renewable energy certificates. So, starting with what the government expects the energy generation potential to be from the burning of wood from native forests for energy.
Senator, I might begin to answer that question. It's probably fair to say that all we really have to go by is the past experience that we have. That is, of course, that electricity generated using native forest wood waste as a fuel source was previously eligible under the Renewable Energy Target Scheme. And that was the case from the commencement, actually, of the mandatory renewable energy target in 2001 through to, I think, November 2011. In that time, there was only one renewable energy certificate created specifically from the category of biomass from native forest wood waste. Now, it is also the case that native forest wood waste embodied in either manufactured wood product, waste products from construction or furniture, or sawmill residue may also have been
we haven't got much time.
Used to generate. So
to cut to the chase, so from native forest.
Yeah.
So basically, it's being based on previous experience.
Well, that's yeah. We don't really have any basis at this stage for forecasting what future experience may be.
So you haven't done any projections of any different situation into the future compared with what
no, we haven't gone to that detail. I think our overall expectation based on past experience is we're not expecting a lot of generation, additional generation as a result of this measure.
So do you know of any generators that you know of that are ready to make use of this?
I'm personally not aware
from native forest. No, so no, not aware of them. Okay. Could you detail any industry bodies or businesses that have been requesting government for the inclusion of native forest, use of wood from native forests in the renewable energy target?
So there were submissions made to the 2014 review of the renewable energy target, and I gather some 46 submissions did address the question of the status of native forest wood waste.
So are they public submissions?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
They're public submissions, and I think the review was based in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet,
okay.
So there's through the PM&C
so
website.
Do you know, has there been any other submissions to government that aren't public that you're aware of?
No, not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Could you take that on notice and see if there have been any other submissions to government, actively requesting the native forest wood to be included?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah.
Do that.
Do you know whether there have any energy retailers have expressed interest in acquiring RECs from native forest wood burning?
No, I'm not aware that that's the case. That's not to say it's not the case, but I'm not aware that that's the case.
Okay, or whether there have been any energy retailers advising against acquiring RECs from, or allowing native forest wood to be included as RECs?
Look, it's really a commercial decision for the liable entities under the scheme as to where they source the certificates they need to meet their liabilities. I haven't heard either way.
Okay, but again, if you could take on notice as to whether there has been, correspondence or advice either way from energy retailers about the inclusion of native forest wood, energy from native forest wood.
Yes, can certainly take that on notice.
Okay. Is it planned to include the provisions for the burning of wood from native forest as part of the legislation that's going to be introduced, or as specific regulations?
While the government has announced that it intends to reinstate eligibility for native forest wood waste, it hasn't made any announcements about specifically how it will do that. It's really for the government to state its intentions in that regard.
So, do you know has the legislation or the regulations been drafted?
So we're working on a package, Senator, but as I say, it's really a matter for the government as to when and what the nature is of its announcements in relation to the specifics of that package.
So working on a package, so when is it expected that it will be ready to be introduced to the Parliament?
Well, we're working as fast as we can. The government, it's clearly we've been advised that it's the government's priority to prepare that legislation, and partly that is to provide the certainty that the industry is seeking.
So what's your timeline then on your expectation as to when you will have something ready for government to be able to be introduced?
I guess, the word I would use is imminent. It's probably the best word I could use to describe that. But again, it's really a matter for the government to decide when legislation will be introduced.
Okay. In terms of the legislation and regulations, how is it expected they'll be similar to or different from the pre-2011 regulations?
Well, I think the general intent will be as it was previously, Senator, which is that it's not the idea that you would encourage harvesting of native forest wood waste for the sole purpose of energy production. Once again, the details of that you will have to wait to see.
Okay. All right. In terms of the pre-2011 regulations, so are there any sort of power generators that are operating under the transitional arrangements that are in the pre-2011, or the transitional arrangements in the 2011 legislation, so operating under the regs that existed?
So I'd actually have to take that question on notice. I'm not aware that there are, but to be certain, I really need to take that on notice.
Okay, well, if you could, and sort of how many, what they are, how much power they're generating, and in particular, do you know whether there are any processes of auditing them as to whether they complied with the conditions under those regulations?
I guess it sort of relates to the question of whether there are any.
Yeah.
So I'll take that on notice.
Okay, and finally, given that it's 1 minute to 11, what have you done? I mean, you haven't done any further analysis, you were saying, based on past history, but have you done any analysis regarding potential carbon dioxide emissions from the proposal to include the burning of native forest wood under the RET?
No, we haven't, but again, I think the general principle here is that this is native forest wood waste that would either be burnt anyway or would be left to rot on the forest floor, and so the idea is that it's actually beneficial from an emissions point of view to have electricity generated from that wood waste rather than have emissions emanated from it and no electricity generated.
Okay, so you haven't done any further analysis as to whether there would be other further CO2 emissions, or what the carbon accounting of it would be?
No, Senator.
No. Well, one final question is, the Climate Change Authority in its review in 2012 recommended that the government should commission a new study about the likelihood that the logging of native forests would increase if native forest wood waste was an eligible fuel under the RET. This wasn't considered in the Warburton review, but I'm wondering whether in considering in the process of deciding to include wood waste, was such a review considered?
Senator, we're considering and advising the government on, what would be the most appropriate arrangements for reinstating native forest wood waste eligibility. Yes, the CCA made recommendations in that area, as did the Warburton review. All those factors are being taken into account.
So has there been any internal review following that line of recommendation from the Climate Change Authority?
Well, I'm not sure how much detail to go into our sort of internal workings on this issue, but As I said, we've generally taken into account those previous recommendations and the subsequent work.
Well, I mean, the
of the Warburton
CCA
review.
recommended that there be a review, so has there been any review of that type?
Well, there's been the Warburton review, but other than that, there has not been a review.
Okay.
Chair, can I just ask one clarity? Senator Rice asked about the package that, Mr Archer, you said you're preparing a package to government on the inclusion of biomass into the...
Well, it's a package that relates to all the announcements that the government has made about reforms to the
including
renewable energy
biomass,
target.
though.
That's correct.
Yeah. So did you say to Senator Rice that package includes biomass being introduced through legislation or regulation?
No, I wasn't specific,
No,
Senator.
Right. Well, which is it?
No, the answer that I gave was that the details will be in the package, which will be revealed at the time of the government's choosing.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Just been advised that the average tax per tonne of reduction in emissions was under the carbon tax was $1,300 per tonne as opposed to $13.95, which is 93 times more expensive. So thank you very much for your patience all day today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. So the committee stands suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow.